to be here. Being at SANS, it feels a lot like coming home to the place where I learned so much of what I needed to be able to break into systems, understand how to help people with them. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how I got there, but mostly about how you can develop this mindset of offensive security research, about how you can turn yourself into somebody who is not just out there and capable as a researcher, but someone that other people can depend upon, someone that has this searing desire to make the world a better place through being really, really evil on the internet, okay? So yeah, I'm Tarah. I have had quite a chance to experience security from one side to the other. I'm incredibly fortunate to have my husband here with me today. For those of you that don't know Deviant Olaf, he does Locksport, which is sort of the quiet way that we say that he breaks into places for a living and is something of a professionally dangerous gentleman. So that's incredibly hot or anything. And I know he's been part of the SANS family for much longer than I have. I feel almost like I'm married into SANS, if that makes any sense. And we have fabulous and wonderful kittens together. Kittens are always good. We should always have more of them on the internet. And mostly I want you to look at these kittens and enjoy the experience of staring at them and feeling good about being online, because most of the time when we're online, there is not a lot of good going on right now that we can see, right? There's a lot of divisiveness, a lot of anger, a lot of conflict, and being the kind of people who find that conflict, make use of it, and turn it into a wedge to attack systems can be mentally, personally, emotionally, spiritually exhausting, right? So always remember the kittens. You can always find kittens on the internet, and as long as there are kittens there, everything is in fact going to be okay. You can find comics, but mostly what you can find is a place to belong. The place that I came from, the place that I belonged, was a little farm in the Willamette Valley in Oregon, where there is incredible wine. I didn't know that when I was 10. I know that now. Found out that when I was 16, a little too early. And I might have spent a little too much time getting into trouble. I don't usually talk about this when I talk about the kind of work that I do, mostly because either the audience is too big or it's too small, or it's the wrong kind. I'm very rarely in a crowd of my peers, right? I'm very rarely in a crowd of people who do offensive security research for a living or who are trying to. And the thing that I have noted is that almost every one of us got into a ton of trouble when we were younger, right? We were weird, we were strange, we didn't graduate from the right school, we didn't do the stuff we were supposed to do. And here's the part I don't usually tell people. How many people in here have been arrested? Raise your hand. How many people in here are not comfortable with admitting that they've been, okay. I'm going to linger on this just a moment because it's part of how we take our lives, our experiences, and turn them into things that let us help other people. Our origin stories and who we started out being is what goes into making us the kind of people that know how to find vulnerabilities on the internet, find them in systems, find the kinds of cracks and holes in the world that we can exploit for good. This notion of the Robin Hood mentality doesn't really work anywhere else except in this room, right? I got into a lot of trouble. And when I say a lot of trouble, I mean like legal trouble, like time in back of cop cars trouble, like drug dealing trouble, like stuff 16-year-old girls who are homeless do to keep a roof over their heads, right? That's the kind of trouble I got into, and it turned me into the kind of person who realized a couple of things. One, if I didn't leave Portland, I was going to die. And two, school is the silver bullet. How many of you watched a show called The West Wing? Right? There's this great moment in there where Sam Seaborn is playing a devil's advocate arguing to a woman who's coming in and lobbying for education dollars. And he says, look, I would love to make everything work for you that I can. I would love to allocate this budget to you. Here's how you can do this for me, because we know at this point that education is the silver bullet. We know that knowing more, that learning more is the way that we change class, futures, economic possibilities for people in this world that had no other opportunities. I knew education was the silver bullet. There wasn't another way to escape. It was the way you got there, the way you started figuring things out. And I like taking chances, right? I like taking lots of chances. I like spending time working on probability theory. And I think that for those of you, who's a poker player in the room? Anybody? We got, what, 2 hands in here? Oh my God, how do you not spend more time at the poker table, y'all? It is absolutely a metaphor for information security. You have to make good decisions in the moment and know that some of them are going to turn out poorly and yet have faith that over a long period of time they're going to average out to better than anything else. That is what information security is. Think about this game, because it's a beautiful one, and it's a peaceful one, and it's also just a total blast. The concept of why we do what we do is needed everywhere around the world. They need it places they don't know they need it. They need it places in foreign policy, in international relations, in conflict studies. We're taking this field of cybersecurity and porting it all over the world. And that's because this is the world we live in. What's this? Yep. Yeah. That's the world we live in right now. That's the world every one of us lived in right now. How many of us had to remediate WannaCry when it happened? I was on that incident response team, right? Yeah. When shadow brokers blew, when WannaCry happened, the people that they called were the people who knew how to create vulnerabilities like this one, who understood what had happened when that giant drop landed from shadow brokers, right? Remember when that happened? I remember I was actually at a SANS event. I was at SANS 2017 in Orlando. How many folk in here have been to a SANS event previously? Maybe one of the ones in Orlando before? Yeah, exactly. You know the Hyatt Regency, the carpet on the ground in there, like this mad psychedelic carpet at the floor of the Orlando Convention Center in the Hyatt, right? I have nightmares about staring at that carpet because I was like my own little ops center over in a corner, staring at that carpet and remediating something most of us hadn't seen and realizing how bad it was going to be. While I'm talking, if any of you want to raise a hand, ask questions, go right on ahead. I'm going to leave a little bit of time at the end, but I'd actually love it if you wanted to raise hands, give me thoughts, participate a little bit. And the reason why is we're all just hackers together in here. Right now, I'm giving you a different way of thinking about a couple of things, but this is my home, and I'm still a junior, frankly, in the most advanced kinds of offensive security research. I think most of us probably feel that way, right? How many of us in this room, Ed, keep your hand down, is an expert in offensive security? That is why we're peers in this room. Nobody's going to call themselves an expert in offensive security. We all know we're beginners. We know this is a field that is exploding now, that this isn't a place where feeling comfortable about the amount you already know is going to serve you well when it comes to helping people in the future, right? So how do we do it? How do we become the kind of people that should be trusted with other people's safety, right? How do you become this kind of person who can be trusted to break into places, to tell people what they need to do to keep themselves safe? Well, there's a couple of things you got to do. You need to get some heroes. You need to publicly commit to what you're doing and don't quit. That's really all that it is. And it's a bit of a recipe for a lot of different things. But when I thought of what makes me stay in this field, what keeps me going when it's not fun anymore, it's these 3 things. Get some heroes, publicly commit to the work that you're going to do, the education that you're going to get for yourself. And it doesn't have to be expensive. It can just be something that you're promising the world that you'll do to make it better. And third, don't ever quit. Never, 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 never give up, as Winston Churchill once said. I included one more extra never in there. Never, never quit. Get some heroes. All right. I was a perfectly respectable general cybersecurity practitioner. I could do it all. I was in smaller companies. I did SOC, and I did incident response, and I did, some vuln scanning, stuff like that, contractual and so forth, and I realized something one day. Where did all this start? Why did I want to become an offensive security researcher? Well, so there I was. And I don't remember the exact morning, but I remember I was stuck at my school. I was teaching a class on information security at Seattle Central College. And I was asked to show up and do this talk about how to become a cybersecurity researcher for a living. And so I end up on PBS Nova having this conversation, and some guy just shows up on the webcast with me. This is 2015. And I stopped and I looked and I was like, wow, that guy's got a pretty cool office, actually. I was pretty impressed. I mean, I was in an institutional kind of backdrop. I had, the kind of sort of half-empty whiteboard behind me and terrible Wi-Fi that is endemic of all community colleges. And I'm staring and going, wow, I wish my backdrop was as cool as that guy's. Oh my God, that's Ed SCOTUS. Didn't realize it at the moment, and then went, holy cow, this is absolutely amazing. We had this wonderful conversation about how to help people, how to learn to become a cybersecurity researcher, how to become someone who's in infosec for a living. It was deeply, deeply focused on the kind of people that didn't know that this was a career option open to them. How many of us grew up, like at the age of 10, thinking, I want to be a hacker when I grow up? Okay, you don't count. Almost none of us did, right? First, the field didn't exist. And second of all, how could you have thought that this was going to be a career instead of something that was featured on the evening news, right? Instead of something involving some strange guy who whistled nuclear launch codes. And yet, we started having this conversation about why and how you could get into this field. How many of you are full-time right now professionally employed as an offensive security researcher? That is awesome. How many of you want to be full-time professionally employed as an offensive security researcher? Yeah. Massively more hands for the second one. And that means you're here to learn, to be aspirational, and that is incredible. It's hard to find this education. I didn't know it existed out there. And the reason why is most of us not only didn't know that the field was going to be available, most of us didn't think it was a field you'd go into. Like I didn't grow up thinking, hey, I think bank robbery's got a solid 401k, right? So I think about the nature of that conversation and what it did. I remember saying in that conversation, I am not a security researcher, but I am a hacker. And it was the first time I'd really owned that. And I thought to myself, but what would it take to be somebody who could uncover vulnerabilities, who could add this technical specialty to what it was that I wanted to do for a living? And I looked at that guy and I went, that's a good teacher. And I grabbed a hero. Grab a hero. Think of the person in your head who you know has the job that you want, who does the thing that you want to do, and start asking yourself, how do I get to where they are? Ask them. You might be stunned to learn that they will hang out with you and talk with you, and they'll tell you anything that you want to know about how to do something that they love enough to have made it their life's work. They absolutely will. Any of them will. Anyone who's worth being your hero will tell you how to do it. That doesn't mean right away. Maybe they wrote a book, start there. Maybe they put a lot of material on the internet, watch that first. Send them a thank you. And that's a way to get a hero. Not just a mentor, but somebody that you look up to, somebody that you want to be like. Fair? Ed's one of my heroes. I absolutely, yeah, come on, right now. I don't think I could have imagined, 3 years ago that I'd be standing on a stage being introduced by him. And I don't know what I'm doing here instead of you. I'd rather sit down and listen to you talk some more. It's incredible, right? And to have this opportunity to learn from someone like that is the reason I'm standing here. However, do not compare yourself to your heroes too soon. You're going to be junior for a while, and that's fine. Starting as someone who does penetration testing, who does red teaming, who does physical entry, right, it's not something that you luck into. I told you before, and I'm being very kind of raw and open right now as we have this conversation. Before I met him and started thinking he was super cute, Deviant was one of the people I was a fan of. right? I was like, that's incredible work this guy does. How do you break into buildings for a living and get paid to do it? I mean, legally, right? Ask yourself questions about how you can get to where your heroes are, but don't think that you're going to start immediately breaking into systems like Ed or picking locks like Deviant. It doesn't happen, right? They are 20-year overnight successes, right? It takes a long time to do this, and that's okay, because what they're doing it for is not the money. They're doing it for the love, and you yourself have to do it for the love as well. But don't compare yourself too soon. If you start comparing yourself to your heroes instead of using them as someone to look up to, you start getting a little bit frustrated. How many of us in here are perfectionists? That is a terrible, terrible cycle, and it's incredibly difficult to break your way out of, right? The way that we think about how much we have achieved is often to compare ourselves to other people, right? Perfectionism is a disorder in your head that says that you're never going to be good enough, as opposed to something that lets you get to where you want to be. It's not a tool, it's a hobble, all right? Iterating a little bit better and improving a little bit at a time is how you end up there. Perfectionism is a cycle where you circle around and around and around in one place. Iterating and forgiving yourself for imperfections as you improve and while you learn is a cycle that travels upward. Fair enough? Makes some sense? That's what you have to start breaking your mind into. And I am telling you this right. Do as I say, not as I do. I mean, he'll tell you, most people will tell you that know me and have known me for a while, I will beat myself up like there is no tomorrow. And I think a lot of us understand that people in information security, the kind of people that end up here, are brilliant, sometimes by themselves a lot, sometimes a bit more socially isolated. I am all of those things. And it leads to a lot more internal feedback, I think, than a lot of other people get. Make some sense? That internal feedback can stop you from breaking out of your own cycle. And so there is a way to figure this out. I've got a question over here. I was just looking at you. Go ahead, yeah. I'd love the question.
This is all linked kind of to some of the culture around like hacking. I'm not saying it's really the good culture, but a culture of like constantly needing to compare yourself to show that you're like best or elite or whatever it is.
Stunt hacks, yeah.
So you feel this pressure like you have to show up and be amazing and show off, even though most of the time I feel like from the hands we're seeing, you don't really know what they're doing. Don't feel like they do. So
Yeah.
I'm curious if you've experienced that at all.
Oh, have I experienced? Yeah. So the question is, do we think that this cycle of self-critique, this cycle of perfectionism is closely related to the way that hacking culture has developed, the way that information security operates in the community, in the scenes? Without any question, you are absolutely correct. The way that the original hackers started getting attention was stunt hacking, right? Stunt hacks, legal or illegal, I mean, there's nothing really that's legal about most stunt hacks at this point, are the way that you compete, the way that you show off, the way that you get your skills. And starting in a culture like that, we're trying to turn the X Games into the Queen's Equestrian Games, right? We're trying to go from a culture where there is a competition to a collaboration. Maybe a better example would be going from the X Games to the Imperial Riding School in Vienna with perfection, collaboration, coordination, beauty, and more than anything else, synchronization, right? We're trying to go from one place to another, and this right here stops us from doing that. It stops you from reaching out to people to collaborate with them because you're scared they're going to think that you're not as good as they are. I mean, let that one sink in for a moment. I'm always afraid to get feedback on my work. I always want to get it just a little bit better so that I'm not ashamed to show it off, not ashamed to hand it to the person that I'm going to be talking to. And I work really hard to be okay with my terrible, terrible first drafts of things. Because a first draft is the point where you stop and you give it to somebody else. But how many of us will give a first draft to somebody else? It's a hard thing to do, right? So yeah, it is the culture. It's absolutely the reason why we are locked into this sense of perfection, because there's not just a culture of stunt hacking, there's a culture of mockery, around not doing it right, around imperfection. I mean, think about how fast we on infosec Twitter pile on somebody that does something stupid, right? So, oh my God, you want to see a category? There's only one justification for this, which is stupid bank password policies. Like, you can mock them all you want to, that's fine. 8 characters, my arse. Yeah, no spaces, 8 characters, no special characters. You have to have 1 capital letter. Oh no, you can't use that special character. You have to use one of these 3 predetermined special characters. Okay, you can make fun of them, that's fine. If you want to understand why we have what we have in this culture, it's because we are right now in this moment, not just in information security, but in the larger universe of the internet, transforming from something that used to be a spearhead of creativity and joy and competition and mental illness and fear and innovation and all of the things that go into making something new into something that is a requirement for living properly. 30 years ago, you could live a full, complete, and amazing life without having access to the internet. Now, you can't get paid, function, eat, you can't deal with that. It's not just an industry, it's a utility. It is part of the fundamental right of humanity to have access to the internet. And the problem with that, just like a fundamental right of humanity is to breathe air, is that sometimes people can pollute it. So people have begun to pollute the internet with frightening, hateful, problematic themes, posts, content, and to think about why we don't step up and start fixing it more often is tied very closely into our fear that we're not good enough. So how do we get good enough? Be just a little bit more basic. Like, I have Uggs and I'm drinking Starbucks. I'm fine with myself. Be a little more basic. Think about going back to school. Think about the way that you learned back in the day. How many of us right now are in some form of, other than literally sitting in this class and doing this SANS class this week, how many of us are in any kind of ongoing formal or informal education that you have some responsibility for? Oh, that's amazing. That's wonderful. There didn't used to be this kind of educational opportunity for people who were in professions, right? So think about being a little bit more basic. Now this right here, this conversation about training, learning, certification, is going to have a little bit more to do with the people in this audience, very specifically, who are a bit more underrepresented. Certifications and education and proving that you know what you know has a lot more to do with getting jobs than keeping them, but getting jobs matters to learning, right? So as I started thinking about how to not just learn to be an offensive security researcher, but also how to prove that I could do offensive security, I started asking myself, what do I need to learn? Where do I go? The answer is there is formal and informal training that exists out there. We're standing in, frankly, the best training that there is, right? SANS is, without any doubt, I was actually just saying this, and I'm not being paid to say this, I'm here because I care. I was actually standing there over, I think I was brushing teeth this morning in the hotel room and just saying, yeah, you know, for everything that I've seen in information security, SANS has the most consistent delivery of excellent material of any other organization I've ever seen doing cybersecurity training, right? There's a reason we send people here. There's a reason that we learn here, and it's because there is consistent excellence here. And as much as we all complain and whine and moan about the evaluations, that's how they do it, so fill out your evaluations at the end of this thing. I'm not being paid to say that. I actually mean it. I want to read them myself. Now, these certifications and trainings matter more to underrepresented populations. Do you know how much more important it was that I got this than it was for most of my colleagues? I'll tell you right now, it was incredibly important to be able to represent some of the stuff that I was capable of doing, even though the material itself wasn't necessarily always as applicable to what I was doing every single day. Now, don't get stuck in certification exams. Instead, study long enough that you can be pleasantly surprised if you pass the first time, because most of the time it's pretty cheap to take the exam again the second time. Focus on what you're learning instead, and don't wait too long to take those exams, especially to the people in this room who are underrepresented minorities in technology and infosec. Don't let your desire to get a good score stop you from taking the test too long, okay? And that is because failing is good. Failing is good. Failing is good, failing is good, failing is good. I'm just going to repeat that to myself because I need it more than you do. Failing is good. Failing is good. What's failing? What else is failing? It's okay. Learning. Somebody was going to shout it out. Learning. There we go. Learn. Try. Okay. Good. These things aren't winning, right? Winning is usually better. I like winning. I like winning a lot. But failing is better. Failing is better because it lets you have that opportunity to learn something and improve. That is something that it's viciously difficult to get integrated into your head after a lifetime of living in that horrific perfection cycle, right? But the answer, when I said the perfection cycle keeps you in this flat loop in a single plane, and only learning to iterate and be better starts to rise the spiral, failing, not winning, is what rises you up that spiral of iterating for better and improving and rising and getting better and better in your skills. Does this make sense? More cats. Need more cats. I don't even like talking about failing. I hate the feeling of it. And one of the ways that I manage a fear of failure, which I don't even have to ask you to raise your hands. Come on, we're all scared of failure, right? One of the ways that I manage that fear is I engage in public accountability. So now that we know that getting heroes helps you through those cycles of fear and doubt and an inability to really tell what the straight line to where you want to be is, the second part of this is get publicly accountable. So publicly commit to the learning and the information and the education that you're going to get for yourself, that you're going to put yourself through. So last year, I publicly admitted exactly this. The OSCP is an incredibly difficult exam for a lot of people. And I publicly said out loud last year I was going to do this. And I told people I was scared of it, right? I told people why this mattered to me, and I said, join me while I'm doing this. I've probably met 50 people doing the OSCP and doing this informational journey that have incredibly improved my life. And I failed it the first time, right? Failed. Failing's good. Failing's good. And that's okay, because what I did was I learned. Also, I killed the buffer overflow exercise. It was awesome. That's the hard one, right? It was great. I figured it out. I got a chance to figure that part of it out. And sometimes you just want to get all the way through it the first time and fail it and get it out of the way and then figure out what's going on from there. I mean, it's kicking around the inside of those labs, you know, in the middle of that exam, 24 hours, and I was like, I will not get wine out of the refrigerator. I will not get wine out of the refrigerator. Tapping away on my keyboard, and I finally get the buffer overflow exercise 6 hours into it, and that was fine. That was fine, because I figured out that I, missed a memory step in there, and learned. So I took it again. But here's what I did before I took it again. Sec 560. I told you I was going to put your picture in here twice, Ed. There's no more, or maybe there is, and that's the rest of the slideshow. I took Sec 560 from Ed, and I learned. I think I got like 6th in the CTF for that class. It was like hours and hours and hours later. The people that were in that class were incredible. I learned a lot, made 2 new friends, and yeah, failed. Second time, that's fine. It's coming. It's fine. You know why? Publicly commit, but don't give up, right? Don't ever give up. Never, ever give up. Fine. It's fine. I'm going to keep going. I'm absolutely going to keep going. And now I super, super wish that Jake Williams was in this room right now, because the second thing I did was I took Jake's class. Sec 660 it's very different than Ed's class. Ed's class is more focused on a holistic view of how to break into full systems. Jake's is very targeted and it's very interesting how he approaches the material differently. it's important to have those different perspectives in how you learn things, right? These are differently two of the greatest classes I've ever taken in my entire life, and I don't mean in cybersecurity. I mean across all of my educational experience. And I have failed out of so many schools. I know exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to lots of education. You know, when you try, right? But this class right here, especially the process of web app pen testing that was included as a module on one of the days, completely opened my eyes to a concept I had missed before in the track of education that I was pursuing in offensive security. The way that he processed this was incredibly valuable to me, and I started learning it a little bit differently. So the answer to all of this, of course, is don't ever quit, right? Never quit doing it. But the problem is that we get scared sometimes. We get scared and we want comfort instead of challenge. So how many of you are familiar with a gentleman named Daniel Kahneman? He wrote a book. Yeah, I knew that one. Ian's going to know this one. Yeah, absolutely. He wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. That was sort of the popular science book that came out of his 40-odd years of collaboration with a gentleman named Amos Tversky. Kahneman won the Nobel Prize for Economics, I think it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and unfortunately Amos Tversky had passed away, so he wasn't able to receive the prize as well, but undoubtedly had he lived, he would have received it along with his partner. Kahneman and Tversky started in 1977 with a paper on the nature and notion of unconscious cognitive bias and what it tricks our minds into thinking is rational. From this work that Kahneman and Tversky did, essentially sprang forth the field of behavioral economics, how we as human beings respond to incentives, how we think, how we process, how we self-motivate, how we self-medicate, and how we progress along figuring out what our next goal set should be. If you've ever encountered something in poker, which I have a lot, called the Gamblers Fallacy, you'll start to understand why the nature of behavioral economics is so important. When you are and I'll show you the Gamblers Fallacy pretty quickly. If you've got a coin, if anybody in here has a coin, I don't think this is SANS, nobody's got coins here, right? Anybody who's got like an actual quarter in front of them, or a coin of any kind that's got a front and a back. So if you start just in front of yourselves, flipping those coins and start looking at them and watching them process. All right, how many people in here have coins in front of them? Maybe just a few people? Start flipping a couple of coins in front of you. Tell me what the first result is. Heads. Try flipping it again and see what happens. Try flipping it one more time. On average, what should the next result be? Heads. Yeah. What's the next result probably going to be? Yeah. We're very good at identifying that particular fallacy individually when we're looking at something as simple as a coin flip. We know that when you flip a coin and you get heads, tails, most people will very, very subconsciously expect a result of heads next, right? Because we think that it should be fair. We think that there should be the even amount of results from one side to another. In actuality, the issue we are looking at is not a question of whether or not the coin is flipping correctly. What we're looking at is a probability set and a world in which we are perfectly capable of existing in a multiverse where every single coin all the time is always going to hit heads up. We don't live in that multiverse, but it exists, right? That's the nature of probability. We think that that's what's happening. Now that fallacy, that gambler's fallacy, the expectation of the result you think should happen next, gets a lot more complicated in poker, right? In poker, there's a concept of going on tilt. Now, this idea happens when somebody has something happen to them, which is probabilistically unlikely and takes a lot of their money away. So it's very unlikely that you will flop a full house in Texas Hold'em. The odds are approximately 4,700 to 1, I believe. So we should think of 4,700 to 1 and the odds of flopping a full house as being so improbable that you typically wouldn't build it into your algorithm of what you would think the other person has in their hand. Now, if you are in a situation where you're playing with someone and they've got a really good hand and you flopped a full house, you can play to the end of a hand where they have made a straight, where they've got two pair, where they've got a set, great set, right? They've got, they got a set of aces. And they stare at you when you turn over your 10-8 offsuit at the end to show the full house. And they get furious. How could you stay in? How could you possibly have stayed in for this long? How could you have not gone out when I bet hard originally? And the improbability of you having had the hand that you had makes them more angry, even though there's no real reason for the anger at the cards. Who are they actually angry at? Themselves, right? Because they've identified and don't want to acknowledge in themselves their own imperfect capacity to calculate the odds, right? So going back to this idea of behavioral economics, the reason why behavioral economics operates the way that it does is because people want to think that they're right, they want to think that things are fair, they want to think that things are going to be equal, all other things being held equal. And in reality, that's not the way that life works. Or rather, it does, it's just mostly invisible to us. So the way that behavioral economics and the work that Kahneman and Tversky did teaches us that what we think is a fair answer often is colored by what we expect should happen, not what we have calculated will happen probabilistically. And so the way that we start processing that in our heads is we want to be right. We like the feeling of being right. We like the feeling of winning. Nobody likes the feeling of failure. And instead sometimes of choosing the challenge, of choosing the act of being visibly wrong, of being visibly incorrect or junior or not as good, we'll choose to limit ourselves artificially to the kind of work we know will provide a solid result. The problem with that is that what you're doing is you're comforting yourself instead of challenging yourself. So instead of doing that, instead of letting the irrationality of behavioral economics and the prediction that you yourselves can't make good choices, given all of the evidence, do this. Optimize your time instead of comforting your brain meats. Find a way to study fast and hard. Pareto optimize. Do the 80-20 rule for the work that you're doing on an everyday basis, right? We want to think that this is who we operate like. We do not operate like data. Most of us are a little bit more the doctor, right? The doctor loved opera, but he wouldn't sing it in public for years, right? He was afraid of being made fun of. He was someone who experienced doubt and fear. He was patterned on a neurotic, frightened, egotistical individual who was also brilliant and capable of leaping to conclusions. They programmed light with intuition in Star Trek Voyager, right? And what did it end up with? A massive neuroses, of course. The way that the doctor processes information, the way that the fear that has been injected into his personalities, into his personality subroutines and algorithms, makes him someone who is the most, by far, relatable character to me on the entire show, because we process like this. We let fear get to us. And instead of rapidly learning and optimizing with a little bit of failure at the end of each piece of a journey, what we do is we'll often pursue diminishing returns. What is the average passing score on most certification exams? Or most classes of any kind whatsoever? Is it usually around 75%-ish, maybe? Yeah, 75, 80% most of the time to pass any kind of exam, to get a degree, to do a reasonably decent job getting through a piece of information. It's right about there. That's where it lands in diminishing returns, where your effort and your concentration needs to go. The problem is that most of us will study for a reasonable amount of time and then keep going afterwards to know that you're going to do better than the amount that's required so that you'll have the emotional gratification and surety of success at the end of it. Does this make sense? How many of you would love to get a 100% score on your CISSP exam? I have never in my GPA didn't matter. I've never in my life asked somebody what they got on the CISSP when I was hiring them. Why do you want 100%? Pardon on this one on SANS, but why would you want 100% on the SANS? Now, actually, the SANS is different because you actually get on that mailing list thing, and that's cool. Never mind, ignore that one. So why would you want that 100%? Why does it matter? Bragging rights. Bragging rights, I got 100% on the CISSP. Hang on, I need to sit down a minute. Bragging rights. That'll do. But why is it a personal triumph? Why is it? What does it validate? What difference does it make? Who are you validating? Yourself? Do you ever tell anybody else ever what your score is? Who's the guy that tells people what their score is? I got 100. I didn't get 100 on mine. I know. They'll tell you what you didn't get. That's kind of useful. But remember, even if what you want is to personally challenge yourself, even if what you want to do on any one of these exams in any class, master's degree in cybersecurity that you're taking at night, I don't care what it is. Remember to ask yourself, at the point at which you know enough to, on average, pass or fail, about 80% of the time with a pass, right there at that red spot, ask yourself why you're going further, right? Make sure that you're not doing it without a cause. You had a question? There is a thing where I think you get on a cool mailing list if you get a really good score on your GAX. I know that. I haven't gotten one of those yet. I'm going to have to do that. Yeah. You don't know the shape of that curve, but you know people. You know people who've taken this exam before. Paul. What's that? You know it's not luck. That's the way to put it. That's a wonderful way to put it. Yes.
You know it's not luck, and also it gives you the maximum cushion for mistakes.
Maximum cushion for mistakes. But what are you cushioning? Risk aversion, exactly. And that is a risk aversion that I want you, even if you can't purge it, to examine it and to know why you're doing it. That risk aversion is often what's stopping us from moving forward faster in our educational track, right? Now, don't just do this. Do different things to solidify this knowledge. Do different things to learn how to be an offensive security researcher, to be the kind of person that should and could be trusted to break into things for a living. So about 6 weeks ago, I was at SANS Network Security, and Deviant took a picture of me. Now, he's taking a picture of me right now. He's a really, really good photographer. And so I struggled to take an okay framed square picture and throw like Valencia filter on it, basically, right? He takes great pictures. That's his picture of me competing in Net Wars, right? That's my picture of me with lipstick on my teeth, like no filters, and I'm like, at the end of it, right? Because what I was doing was learning different things from different people about how to break into systems, about processing what you do and how you operate in your head to get to a different place and apply the knowledge across boundaries. And that's because you have to do this. Radically expose your ignorance. That one gets me like failure too, right? How many of you have succeeded in learning something by pretending that you already knew it? That guy. Yeah. How many of you more often have learned from telling people you didn't know something, quietly in a back room with the shades drawn, everyone wearing sunglasses, and money being passed across the table? Right? Yeah. And it's almost uncomfortable just to raise your hand and say that's what happened. We're supposed to know everything. We're supposed to know how everything works in this world. I mean, I'm about to hit Thanksgiving. Wait, no, Christmas even. I'm about to hit the holidays. And what do we all do during the holidays with all of our relatives? Put passcodes on their Android phones. Start the laptops. Password management. Oh, you cannot use password. No, having the ampersand in there doesn't make this any better, Mom. So that's what we're about to do. Why? Because people who know computers, who know cybersecurity, must know everything, right? Now you get to offensive security, and one of the most common questions I get asked is, hey, will you please hack my girlfriend's Facebook? That is not uncommon. A lot of security researchers have that happen. For those of you that are known as offensive security researchers, how many of you have been asked if you would hack someone else? That's frightening. I didn't expect that. I am a little startled right at the moment. And now I'm going to, that's a lot. That's most of us. How many of us are offensive out there security researchers that people know can do this and haven't been asked to do this? That is a solid eyeball 95% of us. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Let me just click that over there for a second and take a moment. That's a little startling to me. I was expecting some hands. I wasn't expecting that much. That means you're known for doing something other people can't do. That means you're known for being someone who has access, a kind of power other people don't have in a world they don't understand. And also, it's a little terrifying to describe in terms of ethics, right? What were some of your responses when you were asked to do this? Yeah. Yeah. Other responses? Did anybody have a way to put it that was kind? Yeah. How much? Well, Adrian, I think we've just established that you can be bought. We're just asking about price now. All right. So, incurring too much risk. Okay, that's a very, very fair way to put it, because this is a gray world, right? Hack my girlfriend's Facebook isn't necessarily someone, hack my boyfriend's Facebook, hack my husband's car. Sometimes it has to do with the relationship, but sometimes it's, I want to keep an eye on them, I'm afraid of their safety, I'm worried about the kids, something's going wrong here that I don't understand. It's a fear, it's always fear that causes it, right? There's greed often, but mostly it's fear. We're going to have more of a conversation about the ethics of red teaming. I've known that for a while. I've known this since, I think probably about a year or two ago. I've had some great conversations with a friend of mine in cybersecurity in the government. We're going to have a longer conversation about a red team ethical framework, and that's going to be something that we're going to really have to process, because this is new. The fact that this is happening, the fact that we are all being asked to do things that we know are wrong, but that other people can't conceive of as being wrong, right, is an interesting one. The problem is this, and the challenge is this. The people in this room have powers other people don't have. We have the ability as offensive security researchers, as hackers, as people who are part of this community, to do things that other people think of as magic. Now, most of the time when somebody asks me to hack things, it's dudes. They don't ask me to change the oil in their cars, even if they've never done it in their lives. They'll figure out how to do it, right? If they want it done. They don't ask me how to, return a tool, mop a floor, paint a picture. People don't ask you to do things you can learn how to do that seem reasonably easy to learn how to do. And yet, for the people in this room, we figured out how to learn this stuff, right? We figured out how to break into things, how to get in front of a computer and break into stuff. Yet people don't even think that this is something accessible to them. And as a result, it doesn't occur to them to try to learn it themselves. They just ask you to do it. It's the equivalent of asking somebody who's spent the last 30 years of their life perfecting karate to go beat somebody up for you, right? So we have this ethical responsibility, and we know it. We know that with great power comes great responsibility, something that a gentleman named William Viscount Melbourne said in front of the House of Commons in 1817. The possession of great power necessarily implies great responsibility. I know. I know. No, but Uncle Ben didn't say it first. Viscount Melbourne said it first. And he said it because he was having a conversation about the disruption in the early 1800s of the steam engine and technological innovations on business owners and the media in early Britain. The reason he was having this conversation is he was seeing people thrown out of work, not able to understand the new machines, not transitioning into a new economy, and he was calling for the business owners and members of the media listening to him in the House of Commons to take responsibility for the disruption that their acts caused. This is where this concept came from. And I am deeply grateful. I think many of us know right now, yesterday, Stan Lee passed away, right? When we think about Stan Lee, when we think about the creation of Marvel characters, the ability that he had to bring out the best and the most inspirational in characters many of us grew up with and then found complexity in and then got a chance to revisit later was profoundly valuable, and I am going to miss him, right? I'm super going to miss that strip club DJ he played in Deadpool a lot too, right? This concept isn't going away anytime soon. So get your heroes, right? Publicly commit to what it is that you promise you're going to do for not just yourself, but for the community. Do not quit. Never, 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 never quit. And so here is me publicly committing to my December and January. Three times I'm going to fail the OSCP. Yellow. Right? And I'm going to do it because I've got this online access. I'm going to go bug Jake Williams. I'm going to talk about it online. I'm going to talk about what I don't know yet publicly as an offensive security researcher, because this is how you learn, right? This is the information that you need. It's out there. You've got it in front of you. And if you admit you don't know things, people will help you. And you will be stunned at what people don't know that you think they know. Nobody in this room claimed to be an expert. They know they don't know everything. I'm going to tell you right now, I know Ed well enough to know that he's not going to tell you he's an expert in offensive security. Do you know everything about offensive security, Ed? Yeah. Deviant. Do you know everything about breaking into every building? No, I don't want to know the answer to that one. I know you do. What's up, baby? Nope. Yeah. Who knows it all, right? So the answer is publicly commit to, remember? But have that hacking emotional support system in place. These are my kittens. That's Frankie. Wait, here we go. There we go. That's Frankie. Yes. And that's Whisper, Princess Whisperclaw. Sir Francis Fanshawe, the Duke of Devonshire Cream, and the Earl of Bookcase. His Game of Thrones name is Sir Francis the Broke-Purr, but I just call him Frankie Fanks because he's buck-toothed. Have your emotional support system in place. It's okay to lean on people. It's okay to collaborate, to know, to work with other people, because we know what's coming, right? We know what the future looks like in a way that other people don't, okay? More than anything else that I can tell you right now, as much as it's going to hurt, it's going to suck, and sometimes people are going to make fun of you for not knowing stuff, the people who know that they're not experts yet, the people whose opinion it is worth having them think well of you about, is that you should just never, never, never quit. Never give up. Never surrender. And that's me quitting. I'm done for the day. Thank you. There you go.